Silent Hill 2 remake turned out to be a lot better than I or anyone else thought it would be, and I couldn't be happier. I loved my first trip through the game, and I came away from it with a lot on my mind as a fan of both the remake and as a longtime fan of the original game. So I thought I'd take an opportunity to sit down and unpack some of the thoughts I had about the game, what I liked, what I didn't like, what I thought they did better or worse, and what I noticed was a little different this time around. And afterwards, I also want to maybe dig a little deeper into some of the new content made for the remake and get a reaction on that. To start with, the game is a strong 8 out of 10 in general for me. Some people have been lauding it as a 10 out of 10, best game of the year material. I don't think it quite gets there, though. There's a couple of things that bring it down a couple of pegs. First of all, there's some technical issues that unfortunately came throughout my first playthrough of the game that really couldn't be ignored. I imagine they'll be patched out down the line when the game has had a chance to breathe a little bit and the devs get around to it. The frame rate dips being probably the most egregious example of what I'm talking about. There were certain situations when I was playing through it where the frame rate just tanked. The game was just trying to think of too much stuff, or maybe it just got bogged down trying to load things while other things were happening. But regardless, you could see the frame rate dip well below 60, well below 30. Like, it was getting very jittery. As well, there was some enemy jankiness going on. Some of the enemies were glitching around a little bit, popping in and out of like the world geometry and getting themselves stuck, or some of their limbs were crossing their way through walls where they shouldn't have been. So that kind of took me out of the experience a little bit whenever it happened. It was funny to see, but it kind of killed the fear that the game was trying to go towards. And one more thing that I definitely hope they do patch is the sensitivity of the prompts that show up, or the context-sensitive examination prompts whenever you're looking in a drawer. For whatever reason, James could have been standing in front of drawers or panels on the wall or things to examine and staring directly at it, and I was hammering on the button and he was just not having any of it. They probably needed to tweak that a little bit more before they released the game. Technical stuff aside, though, another thing that was on my mind quite a bit as I was going through the game, and I kind of reserved judgment and reserved speaking too much in depth about it until I had a chance to see the entirety of the game, were the performances. This is mostly in comparison to the original cast. It probably doesn't need to be said that this time around there was a lot more budget and they had some actual voice actors come in and do these roles across the spectrum. The remake obviously has a little bit of a leg up in that regard, but if we were to specifically look at the 5 main characters of the game, I think the 2 standouts for me were, of course, James, because we're with him the entire game, as well Angela, who I think is probably the most improved character in this in terms of the performance. Like, every single scene that she was in, and there was even a couple of scenes that weren't even in the original game, they were all on fire. She did a fantastic job of portraying this distraught, traumatized young woman, and I was captivated by her performance. Eddie and Laura both kind of took a while to win me over, I think. They didn't really have their spotlight moments until near the end of the game, when Eddie goes completely off the rails, or when Laura has her big tantrum at the end. It wasn't until we got to those scenes that I was like, yeah, these performances are really good, actually. Eddie does a good job of really putting you on edge, and Laura kind of nails the sincerity of a frustrated little kid without spilling over into overacting, as so many child actors tend to often do. The performance that didn't quite land for me in the remake, though, was Maria. Several of the folks that were watching me when I was streaming through the game were saying that Maria seemed a lot more nuanced and a lot more grounded, and she absolutely did, and I don't hold my personal criticism or my personal tastes against the performer. The performer did a fantastic job, because Maria's a hard role to play. But that said, I was kind of a little too, I think, attached to the original OG version of Maria. It's true that the Maria character, and in fact all of the characters in the remake, were a whole lot more nuanced, because the actors were a little more grounded, and they grounded them a little bit more in reality. And I think that worked well for the 4 characters that were actual people. James, Laura, Angela, and Eddie were all real people. They were all damaged people in one way or another, but they were real people. A little bit of a nuanced performance works for them. Maria, on the other hand, though, she's not a real person. She's a construct. She's an imaginatory fantasy dreamed up by James in this nightmare situation. And with that in mind, I couldn't really escape the idea that the original performance of Maria kind of really nailed what I think James would probably think a fantasy dream girl version of his wife would act like. She was very slippery and very overtly flirtatious, but also very emotionally erratic. The scene that kind of convinced me that I wasn't really on board with the remake's version of Maria was the scene in the hospital when Maria rejoins James, and James once again mistakes her for his wife Mary, and this upsets Maria to the point where she just blows up at James. And I think the original performance of that scene was just done so well by the actress who completely went off the rails and tore into James's character. The remake's Maria, I don't think ever got to that point of being so emotionally charged. So that was kind of what I took away from the performances. Again, not saying that any of them were bad, they were all wonderfully done and they suited the game really well, but I had my little preferences here and there as a longtime fan of the original game. Some other stuff, though, worth gushing over, some stuff that I think was just done perfectly well. First of all, the graphics, not really much needs to be said. Obviously, 20 years later, there's better tech. They used the Unreal Engine to realize Silent Hill, and it looked fantastic in the Unreal Engine. They also made the combat in the game actually work this time around. Low bar to clear, I admit, because the original Silent Hill 2's combat was legendarily bad. So they didn't really have to try too hard, and they didn't really try too hard. All they really did was just copy the Resident Evil remake games that have come out recently and just did that, and it worked. Some people have said that the additional length of the game, which the remake runs probably twice if not 3 times as long as the original game did, kind of detracts and dilutes a lot of the concentration of cool stuff that was in the original. I don't know, I can't exactly find my way to agreeing with that. I struggle a lot with finding the validity and the argument that having more of something that's really, really good is a bad thing. I'm not saying it's an invalid criticism, I just can't get on board with it because I enjoyed all 20 plus hours that I spent playing the game, and I played it at a slow pace, so I took my time and explored a lot of the additional places that you could visit in the town, or extra rooms that you could crawl in and out of in the hotel or in the hospital. I thought it was great that there was more places to go and more things to see, so the additional length of the game didn't really bother me. Some rapid fire just observations that I noticed while I was going through the game. I was keeping sort of a mental list of things that were either changed or things that I noticed that they made a point to keep into the game, stuff they improved, stuff maybe they went a little too far with the changes of. The cryptic sign that says there was a hole here and now it's gone is still in the game. They put it in there very early in the game, in fact, and it still makes no sense, but I still love it. They kept in the gag where James sticks his entire arm into a not empty toilet to fish something out, and they also included reaching into a hole in the wall and wincing at the idea that something might grab him or whatever gag, but they used that gag I think 3 or 4 times throughout the game instead of just the once, which might have diluted that gag a little bit too much, I think. Something new they put in this game was these sections where you're out in the town and you've completed all the puzzle solving that the game wants you to do, and in an effort to hurry you along to the next section, they kick up a windstorm that blows all the fog around. That's something new, and it probably sounded like a good idea on paper, but I don't know, it didn't work for me. I think it was more effective in the original game when you were just wandering around and you just happened to stumble into a brand new area and it turned out to be something like the apartments at the beginning of the game or the hospital in the midpoint through the game. The coin puzzle in the apartments, in fact all of the puzzles, but the coin puzzle specifically, I like that they made it not a pain in the ass to try and solve that puzzle using the user interface. That's one for the quality of life improvements that I'm very much a fan of. One of the things they probably overhauled the most of was one of the enemies in the game, the mannequins. I couldn't get over how much use they got out of these mannequins because they gave them new abilities and they had them fulfilling different roles of different kinds of monsters as you went through the game. In the early parts, they did a lot of sneaking around and jumping out at you from hiding places. Once you got to the prison, they were crawling all over the walls and keeping you looking up half the time trying to figure out where they were and not get jumped or ambushed. That seemed like a good use of one resource and a good effective way to spice up an otherwise important but sort of bland enemy. One thing that had me scratching my head was the decision to cover the face of the corpse that you find in the apartments in front of the TV. In the original game, the corpse was meant to be just as symbolic as most of the monster design because they used the same character model as the player character. You just never saw it because the camera never swung around to show it. In the remake, though, they just put the corpse there and they put a sheet over its face. So now the implication is it could just be anybody and it's just a dead body there. So I think that lost a little bit of the magic when they made that choice for the remake. In the hospital, the bubblehead nurses make a reappearance. Occasionally, the nurses will stop and have a little freak out that involves them shaking their heads back and forth really, really fast with this blurry effect on them. It's unmistakable that this is supposed to be a reference to Jacob's Ladder, which was a film made a long time ago that influenced the original Silent Hill games quite a bit. And I love that they reintroduced that back in as a design aesthetic in this game because it's equal parts deep cut reference and also just spooky imagery that really enhanced those enemies. Speaking of enhancing the enemies, the Fleshlip boss that you fight in the hospital got a major overhaul. I was very surprised when that thing ripped itself down from the ceiling and started coming after me like a giant mechanical spider. Smashing its way through walls and lurching towards me had me very off guard, but I welcomed that because originally that boss wasn't really anything special. It was just James running around a room shooting at the ceiling. After the hospital, the street section where you're walking through Silent Hill at night, it was a lot more linear this time. Before, you could just sort of wander anywhere in town and you could really get very lost, especially considering it was nighttime. But they kind of streamlined that a little bit more in the remake, and that's fine. I didn't mind that at all. There's also a new scene during the nighttime section that involved meeting Angela in the park and having some more dialogue with her. I don't know that it added anything more, but I welcomed it just because it was another opportunity to see more of the Angela performance. The Toluca prison was probably the most changed setting in the entire game because they expanded the heck out of that thing. They added in new monsters like the mannequins that crawled all over the walls. They expanded the prison out to like 3 or 4 different floors. They just made it way, way more robust. They also added in this little gimmick of the lights that you had to keep turning on over and over. That was maybe a half-baked idea that they just threw in there that I wasn't super keen on, but everything else about the prison was great. The super long elevator at the end of the prison, however, they diluted this one a little bit as well. It worked a lot better in the original because in the original game, you stepped into the elevator and the doors just slowly closed and the elevator just slowly started going down. You couldn't get out. You couldn't do anything. You could just do nothing but sit there and wait for this elevator, which takes over 1.5 minutes of real time to finally get to the bottom of its descent. And I thought that was a great unnerving gag in the original, but in the remake, I guess they didn't want to have it going that long, so they sped up the elevator. I don't know, it's a small gag that I think worked better in the original. Much like the Flesh Lips boss, the Abstract Daddy boss was significantly overhauled. Instead of just having a very claustrophobic gunfight with this slow-moving hulking thing in a tiny room, now this creature is a howling monster that chases you through hallways and smashes through walls. The fight was a lot more exciting and a lot more thrilling, I think, and I was on board for that. When James gets into the labyrinth, you can actually come across a swinging PT reference in the form of a giant bleeding, dripping, bulky thing hanging and swinging from the ceiling. I felt like that was a neat little nod. James doesn't get the opportunity to pick up the great knife as a weapon anymore. In the original game, you could actually get Pyramid Head's giant knife and carry it around and even use it as a rather clunky but very effective killing weapon. But they didn't do that in this game, and I understand why, because they overhauled the combat system and a big hulking weapon like that just would not have fit into the new melee fighting system that they built, so they just didn't even bother to try. Instead, it's just there for less than a minute. James drags it down a hallway and uses it to get past a new arbitrary barrier that was put in for no reason, and then he just discards it without words. I'm a little mixed about that, honestly. On the one hand, I don't think that it was really necessary to have the great knife as a weapon in the begin with. Like, even in the original game, it was more of a novelty weapon than an effective weapon. But on the other hand, having it as a weapon was an interesting pseudo-narrative idea, because now James is running around with Pyramid Head's weapon, driving home even further the idea that Pyramid Head and James are kind of two sides of the same coin. I like that in the remake they didn't try to change up the fight with Eddie too much, but they did improve it a little bit by throwing extra fog mechanics in there and improving Eddie's AI a little bit. The fight is a lot more cat and mouse with the two men hunting through the mist and trying to get shots on each other. There's a new mid-boss fight in the hotel that caught me completely off guard because I wasn't expecting a monster from a different Silent Hill game to show up as a predominant little mini-boss fight. The section in the hotel basement where you have to ditch all of your items, including your light and your map, was always a nail-biting section in the original, and I think they did a good job in this new one by adding in higher stakes and more dangerous monsters in that section. One last small detail that they threw in right near the end of the game that was not in the original, but I think is a brilliant addition. After James watches the videotape, you come across a couple of enemies on your way to the end of the game, and they don't attack James. If anything, they actually cower away from him. This is a great little bit of gameplay that feeds into the narrative that James's true nature has come to light, and now all the monsters and symbolic creatures that have been tormenting him up until now are now on the victim side of things, and he's the tormentor. I feel like that small addition added a big punch to the story near the end. The last thing I wanted to do was I wanted to check out all of the other endings that the game apparently has, because we got to the end of the credits, and when the screen came up and told me that I had gotten 1 out of the 8 possible endings, my eyebrows shot right up. The original Silent Hill 2 only had a total of 6 endings, which means that there are new endings and there's new content that were made specifically for the remake that even old school Silent Hill fans like myself aren't aware of. So I think we should check those out. But first, we're going to work our way through the endings that we already know and see how remake handles them. We'll start with the ending that I ended up getting during my first playthrough, which is the saddest ending, the in-water ending.
I miss you so much. I tried. I really did, but I can't. Just can't go on without you. I can't forgive myself for what I've done. I know this isn't what you would want. But I guess it doesn't matter anymore. You're not here. Are you?
Dark. The in-water ending is what you get if you spend most of the game hurt or you don't heal yourself immediately. If you look at certain items in your inventory, like Angela's knife, it all contributes to a background point system that the game has that tracks what ending that you're going to get on your first playthrough. Of the 3 endings that you can get on your first playthrough, that is, of course, the saddest and darkest one, I think. And it's the one that we ended up getting. On to the next one, which I believe is the leave ending.
Mary.
Hey, handsome.
I'm sorry.
Don't be. I told you. I wanted the pain to end.
Yeah. You did. But that's not why I did it. The truth is, I hated you. I wanted you out of the way. I wanted my life back.
If that's true, then why do you look so sad?
Mary.
It's okay, James. Here.
What is this?
It's what you've been looking for.
So James gets to confess. And we have Laura. James trying to makes peace with Laura in this ending, I believe. Fade to white. And there they go. That's why it's called the Leave ending. James leaves Silent Hill, but he takes Laura with him. The Leave ending involves James keeping himself very healthy. You have to try and not fixate on either Mary or Maria. The Leave ending involves James living for himself. That's why he leaves Silent Hill. That's why he takes Laura with him. That's probably one of the happier endings of the game. It's certainly the happiest of the three endings that you can get when you play through the game for the first time. The third ending that you can get on your first playthrough is called the Maria ending. Oh, we're back at Heaven's Night. Of course we are. That is where James would return to if he wanted to be with Maria. I love it. No words.
What is this?
It's what you've been looking for.
Let's go.
I don't think he's going to read that letter to you. He seems to be pretty fixated on what he's leaving Silent Hill with this time. He doesn't even care.
Better do something about that cough.
Oh, he said that very threateningly, like, didn't he? Oh, wow. That's dark. So the implication there is that he's going to leave with Maria, but she's getting sick too. So everything's just going to start over again, and he's just going to end up right back where he started. That's kind of the monkey's paw ending of the game. He submits, he gets what he thinks he wants, but it turns out that it's going to end up becoming the same nightmare over again. Now, the fourth ending of Silent Hill 2 is called the Rebirth ending. This is the first ending that you have to get, that you have to play through the game a second time in order to get, because this ending involves doing a lot of scavenger hunting throughout the town, looking for some artifacts in order to do something, and if you manage to pull off getting all the artifacts and getting to the end of the game, you get the Rebirth ending, which puts you back on a boat, apparently.
Mary. You look so peaceful. Forgive me for waking you. But without you, I just can't go on. This town, Silent Hill. The old gods haven't left this place.
Oh boy.
And they still grant power to those who venerate them. Power to defy even death.
So James has gone off the deep end in this one.
Mary.
Yikes. So they didn't change much from the original game in that one, because that's what happens in the original game too. He's just seen rowing out to an island, and it's implied that he's going to do some sort of resurrection ritual, and that's it. Not a very popular ending, because not a lot of people go out of their way to get that one, because as you saw, there's really not much to it, and you do have to do a lot of effort in order to get it. Now we get to the fun ones. The next one is the first of the two original joke endings, probably the most popular one. It is the dog ending. This is another one that you have to go through the game a second time, and midway through the game you can find a key hidden somewhere that'll let you get into a certain room in the hotel near the end of the game. Oh, look at James going in all gun-ho.
Fuck that shit.
Oh.
Nie. To nie może być prawda.
Whoa. Boop. Aw. James is having none of this. What the hell? That was actually done a little differently. In the original game, that scene is played 1000% for laughs. There's no sinister music. There's no dark red lighting. James doesn't go in guns a-drawn. He just wanders in like a goofball and he just goes, huh? The dog just sits there and looks at him stupid-like. But they played it up a little bit more in the remake here. They made it like a very comically sinister, serious scene with this cute little dog. I love it. The other joke ending is, of course, the long-running Silent Hill tradition of having a UFO ending. Oh, the music. What? Oh boy. Oh man, they went back and used the original PlayStation 2 character model for this. Oh no, wait, it's new James meeting old James? What? Space James. Oh, what? Oh, this is completely different. You've been a clone this whole time. But now it's time to come home. What the frick? And James is like, no. Yeah. He thumbs up the camera. Finally, all is as it should be. Oh, wow. We can be together. And now he's gonna take his place and go after Mary. Oh, boy. Yay! Oh, that's brilliant. The UFO endings were always like these gag endings, but the running gag of the UFO endings in the original Silent Hill trilogy of games. The first game involved the main character, Harry Mason, being kidnapped by aliens. The second game involved James being kidnapped by aliens. In the third game, you play as Heather, who is the daughter of the main character from the first game. And when you get the UFO ending in that game, Heather actually gets to meet the other two protagonists that the aliens have kidnapped. So she meets James and she meets her father, I guess. So they took the idea of the aliens coming down and like introducing other Silent Hill protagonists to the character that you play as in whatever game you're playing a little bit in a weird direction in this one, because in this one it's remake James meeting old school original James, and that is brilliant. Now we move on to the brand new endings that were made specifically for remake. The first of these two endings is called the Bliss ending. White Claudia. He drank White Claudia. I think that's a drug. Is he about to go on a trip?
Are you taping again? Come on. don't know why, but I just love it here.
So far,
It's
this
so
is
peaceful.
the same as how it plays out normally.
You know what I heard? This whole area used to be a sacred place. I think I can see why. It's too bad we have to leave. Promise you'll take me again, James.
Oh, this is new.
I promise.
Come on, we need to finish packing. James, honey, did something happen?
Oh, no, it's fine. Everything's fine.
What? What happened? Where'd he go? He took some stuff. Did it like warp him into the tape and now he's with Mary forever or something? Weird. I don't know what to make of that one. I don't hate it. But that's different. Huh. If my Silent Hill trivia memory is correct, White Claudia is a type of drug, or it's used to make a type of drug, and it grows near Silent Hill. There's a plot point in the first game, I think, where there's a doctor who's also like a drug dealer who's trying to peddle the stuff to tourists or whatever, and taking him down and discovering that as part of the first game. I guess James either trips out and goes back in time somehow to be with Mary before she gets sick. There's a lot of ways to interpret that one, I guess. I need to let that one sit and simmer a little bit before I can sort of make a judgment on it. Finally, the last ending, and the second of the two new endings that they added into the remake here. This one is called the Still Ending. Oh, we're back in the car again. Oh no, is this gonna be another downer one?
I tried.
Okay, so this is
I
the
really
in water
did.
ending.
I can't go on without you.
Oh no.
I can't forgive myself for what I've done.
I know.
Oh, this is different.
What's wrong, honey?
I miss you so much. I'm sorry. I am so sorry.
It's okay.
Will you wait for me?
James. I've always been waiting for you.
Creepy. still got a letter. So it's a variation on the in water ending. For a second there, I was nervous that it was going to take a different turn and maybe be something else. But no, it's just a variation on the in water ending. That's a little disappointing. Silent Hill 2 Remake, again, 8 out of 10. Probably going on my top 10 list of games I've played that came out this year. And I have a feeling it's going to find its audience, especially amongst those who've never seen a horror game like this. Like younger gaming audiences will probably stumble upon this game and be like, oh, is this what horror games were like 20 years ago? And that, I think, is a good takeaway for this Halloween holiday season.